It all started with what seemed like a simple date. I'm a 25-year-old guy, and I had matched with a woman my age on a dating app. After a few days of chatting, we agreed to meet up for dinner. We decided to take separate Ubers and meet at a nice restaurant around 6:30 p.m. When I arrived, she was already at the bar with a drink in her hand. She smiled, greeted me warmly, and seemed in good spirits. We soon got a table and sat down to chat. At first, everything felt easy and natural. She was fun to talk to, and the mood was light. I could tell she'd had a drink or two, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Little did I know, that innocent beginning would take a strange turn later in the night. Before we dive into the rest of the story, don't forget to like this video if you enjoy real-life dating stories, and subscribe for more episodes that will keep you thinking. Now, let me tell you what really happened next. Once we were seated at our table, the evening continued in a casual, almost effortless way. We were both 25, still figuring out life, work, and dating. The conversation flowed, at least at first. She was funny and animated, and I appreciated her sense of humor. But I also noticed that she had ordered another drink almost immediately after we sat down, and by this point, I realized she was already a little tipsy. Not sloppy, just relaxed, maybe a bit more than I had expected. Still, I didn't want to judge too quickly. It's not unusual for someone to have a drink or two before a dinner date to calm the nerves. I figured maybe she just needed to loosen up a little. And besides, she seemed to be enjoying herself. So I let it go. I mean, isn't dating awkward enough without picking apart every little thing? As our conversation continued, I started to notice something else. She didn't seem interested in the menu. While I was scanning through appetizers and entrees, trying to decide between steak or seafood, she barely looked down at the options. I asked her if she was hungry and suggested a few things she might like. She smiled and shrugged, saying something along the lines of, "Oh, I don't usually eat much when I drink." That raised a small red flag in my head. I mean, this was dinner, after all. But I didn't want to push. Everyone has different habits, right? I decided to go ahead and order a couple of small appetizers for myself, something to nibble on while we talked. I was honestly getting hungry, and since she wasn't ordering anything substantial, I didn't want to go overboard with a full entree. When the food arrived, I offered to share, of course. She picked at the plate, took a bite here and there, maybe 3 bites in total, and then just set her fork down. She wasn't rude about it, just uninterested. I gently encouraged her to order something for herself, even something light, but she smiled again and said, "I'm good, really. I don't feel like eating when I drink. I'm just here to have a good time." It was starting to become clear that this wasn't going to be much of a dinner date, at least not in the traditional sense. I was beginning to realize that what I thought would be a casual meal with light drinks on the side had turned into a drink-focused evening with food as an afterthought, at least for her. To be honest, I felt a little awkward. Sitting there, eating my appetizer while she drank her third cocktail, made the dynamic feel off balance. I didn't want to seem boring or uptight, but I also wasn't there to drink the night away. I enjoy a good night out, sure, but I'd pictured a quiet, relaxed dinner where we could get to know each other better, not something that felt like pre-gaming for a night at the club. Her speech started to get just slightly slurred, and she became a bit more animated in her storytelling. Nothing aggressive or loud, just a little off. I nodded and smiled along, but internally, I was beginning to feel the first signs of concern. Was this going to spiral into something uncomfortable? Was she okay? Despite all that, I tried to focus on staying present. I asked questions, made jokes, tried to keep the mood light. And to her credit, she was still fun to talk to. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something about the evening felt unbalanced, like I was the only one trying to actually connect, while she was just chasing the next drink. Looking back, I wonder if I should have said something sooner. Maybe gently steered the evening in a different direction, or asked more directly if she was okay. But in the moment, I was caught between not wanting to seem controlling and not wanting to enable behavior that could turn messy later on. I told myself, maybe this is just how she unwinds after a long week. Maybe this is just a one-time thing. We all have our quirks, And first dates are never perfect. But a little voice in the back of my mind started whispering that maybe we weren't quite on the same page. She leaned back in her chair, swirling the ice in her glass and laughing at something I'd said. But her eyes looked just a bit glazed over. I glanced at the time. It had been about an hour since I arrived. At that point, I started thinking, maybe I should wrap things up before this goes too far. I didn't want to come across as judgmental or harsh. She wasn't being mean or rude, just maybe a little lost in the alcohol. I figured the responsible thing to do would be to pay the check, offer to call a ride, and see her home safely. What I didn't expect was just how much the night still had left in store for me. After about an hour at the restaurant, I could sense the night reaching a natural pause. The energy had shifted. The conversation, while still light, was beginning to lose momentum. Her voice had started to slur just a little more. Her thoughts wandered a bit, and I had to repeat myself a couple of times for her to follow what I was saying. I didn't mind, but I was definitely starting to feel like I needed to step in and bring the night to a close. I glanced at my phone. It was a little after 8 o'clock. I had work early the next morning, 5 a.m. wake-up call, and I'd planned to be home by now, relaxing and getting some rest. The original plan was simple: a casual dinner, a good conversation, and maybe, if the chemistry was right, plans for a second date. Nothing too wild, nothing complicated. So I finished the last few bites of my appetizer, set my fork down, and gently leaned forward. "Hey," I said with a calm, friendly tone. "It's been a fun evening. I was thinking I might go ahead and call an Uber." She looked up from her glass, blinking slowly like the words had taken a second longer to reach her. Her face tilted, half confused, half playful. "Already?" she asked, dragging out the word. "The night's still young." I smiled politely and explained, "Yeah, I've got to be up early for work, but I'd really like to see you again sometime." That's when she perked up. "Well, before you go," she said, pointing toward the front of the restaurant, "there's this bar right across the street. Just one more drink? It's really close." I hesitated. Everything in me said it was time to go. She was clearly tipsy, and one more drink might just push things too far. But I also didn't want to make her feel rejected. She hadn't done anything wrong per se, just maybe overindulged. Besides, I felt a connection. Even if the night wasn't going perfectly, I didn't want to close the door on the chance of something more meaningful. So I made a decision, one I now look back on with mixed feelings. "All right," I said. "One drink. But seriously, just one. I really do have to head home after that." "Deal," she said brightly, grabbing her purse and standing up a bit too quickly. She swayed slightly, but caught her balance. We crossed the street together, the cool night air brushing against us as the lights of the city flickered around. The bar she'd picked was lively, with low lighting, loud music, and the familiar smell of alcohol soaked into old wooden floors. We found 2 open stools at the bar, and without missing a beat, she ordered for both of us. "I'll take a double Jack and Coke," she said to the bartender, then looked at me with a mischievous grin. "And 2 shots, one for each of us." I didn't protest. I probably should have, but part of me was still caught up in trying to be a good sport, to go along, to not make things weird. The drinks arrived quickly. She handed me one of the shots, and we clinked glasses. "To new friends," she said, her eyes locked on mine. I smiled, said cheers, and took the shot with her. Then she started sipping her double Jack and Coke like it was water. I nursed mine slowly, not wanting to drink too fast. Not that I wanted it at all, but I figured it'd be rude to leave a full drink sitting there. 15 minutes passed, then 20. I checked the time again. It was nearing 9 o'clock. My internal clock was starting to tick louder. I leaned over, gently touched her elbow, and said, "Hey, I think I'm going to call that Uber now." She pouted. "Come on, don't be boring," she said, half laughing. "We're just getting started." "I know," I said kindly, "but I really do have to get going. I wasn't kidding about that early shift." She sighed dramatically and rolled her eyes, but I could tell it wasn't out of anger, more disappointment. I stood up and pulled out my phone to call the ride. Then, remembering how tipsy she still seemed, I looked back at her and said, "Hey, do you want to ride with me? I can drop you off on the way if that's easier." That's when her mood shifted. Suddenly, she looked at me with narrowed eyes, the playful tone gone. "What, you think I can't get home on my own?" she asked sharply. "You think I need you to babysit me?" "No, no," I said quickly, trying to clarify. "I just thought maybe it'd be safer, that's all." She waved her hand, dismissing the idea. "I'm fine," she said flatly. "I don't need help. But hey, if you stay a little longer, I might come home with you later," she added with a wink. I paused. That wasn't what I wanted. I hadn't come out tonight for a hookup. I'd come to see if there was a real connection, a possible relationship. And besides, she was clearly too drunk to be making that kind of decision. The responsible part of me kicked in again. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "But I think it's best if we wrap up for tonight. I really would like to see you again, when we're both more clear-headed." She laughed. But this time, the laugh wasn't kind. It was cold, sarcastic. "Wow," she said, shaking her head. "You're one of those guys. Think you're better than everyone. You don't want to have fun? You think you're too good for me?" I didn't know how to respond to that. I'd tried to be polite, gentle, even considerate. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't judge her for drinking. I just wanted the night to end on a good note, not spiral into something uncomfortable or regrettable. I looked down at my phone. My Uber was 2 minutes away. I took a deep breath and said, "Look, I'm going to head out. You're free to stay as long as you want. But if you change your mind, I'm happy to make sure you get home safe." She crossed her arms and muttered under her breath, "Weak!" People around us were starting to glance over. The night was taking a turn, and I could feel the tension building. But at that point, I still had no idea just how messy things were about to get. As I stood there waiting for my Uber, the tension in the air began to thicken. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, eyes fixed on me with a look that was half hurt, half fury. Around us, the background noise of the bar kept going. Music playing, drinks being poured, but it all seemed muted compared to what was happening in front of me. Then, almost out of nowhere, her voice cut through the noise. "So, what, you're just gonna leave me here?" And me," she said loudly, drawing the attention of a few people nearby. "Was this all some game to you?" I blinked, caught off guard. "No, that's not what this is. I've been honest with you all night. I told you from the start that I had to leave early. I even offered to make sure you got home safe." She leaned in closer, her words starting to slur again. "Oh, I get it. You thought you could get lucky, huh? Thought I'd come home with you just 'cause I had a few drinks?" I took a slow breath, trying to stay calm. "That's not what I want. I never pushed for that. I just wanted to spend time getting to know you. And now, I think it's time to call it a night." But she wasn't listening. Her eyes were glassy, her tone now sharp and defensive. "You think I'm that kind of girl? Is that what this was about? Trying to use me?" I held up my hands, palms out. "That's not fair. I've been respectful. I even offered to get you a separate Uber if you'd prefer. I just don't think staying here is a good idea." She stepped back slightly, shaking her head. Then came the words that really hit me. "You're pathetic," she spat. "A real man wouldn't leave a woman like this." I looked around. A few people were definitely watching now. I could feel their eyes on us. I didn't want to escalate anything. The last thing I wanted was a public scene, especially one that painted me as the bad guy. I tried one last time. "Look, can I call someone for you? A friend? A roommate? Anyone?" "No," she said flatly. I, almost growling. "I don't need anyone. I'm not ready to go home, and don't you dare try to tell me what to do." Her words stung, not because they were true, but because they were so far from the person I'd hoped she was. I thought back to how the evening began, the warm smile at the bar, the light laughter, the easy conversation. That version of her felt like a distant memory now. Then, she said something I won't forget. "If you stay," she said, leaning in again, "I'll come back to your place with you." It wasn't seductive. It wasn't sweet. It was manipulative. And more than that, it felt desperate. And not in a way that invited sympathy. It felt like a test, a trap. I shook my head slowly. "No, I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's time we both head home." She scowled. "Fine, go then. Run away. Like the coward you are." Right then, my Uber arrived. I opened the app to confirm it, then looked back at her one last time. She was fuming, not saying anything now, just glaring at me with that fiery, unfocused look people sometimes get when they've had too much to drink and their emotions start to spiral. I tried once more. "Are you sure you don't want me to help get you home?" She narrowed her eyes. "Don't tell me what to do." That was it. I nodded and took a step back. I turned and walked out of the bar, trying my best not to feel like a villain. It was 11 p.m. I was tired. I had work in 6 hours. I had done everything I could to be respectful, to be kind, to ensure she was safe. But at a certain point, she had made it very clear that she didn't want help, and I couldn't force her. As I rode home in the Uber, the night played over and over in my head. I wondered what I could have done differently. Should I have stayed? Should I have insisted on calling someone for her? Should I have told the bartender what was going on? I'd barely been home 10 minutes when my phone started blowing up. Text after text. She called me every name in the book, accused me of abandoning her, said I was a waste of a man. It went on for more than an hour, non-stop buzzing from her messages. Finally, I had to block her. I didn't feel good about it. But I couldn't keep reading the things she was saying. It wasn't fair. I hadn't done anything to deserve that. I went to bed that night feeling heavy, not angry, just disappointed, confused. I don't normally leave people like that. I have 2 sisters, and if they were in that situation, I'd want someone to make sure they were okay. But at the same time, how can you help someone who refuses help and turns hostile when you try? The next morning, I woke up to a new set of notifications, this time on Facebook Messenger. She had found my profile. 9 more messages, just as intense as the ones from the night before. "You abandoned me. You left me alone when I needed you. You're disgusting." And then, silence. I replied with a single message. "I'm sorry the night ended that way. Are you home safe?" No response. Just quiet. Hours passed. Then finally, she replied, "Hey, LOL, sorry for the drunk texts. I ended up meeting up with a friend and got home around 4 a.m. That was it. Like none of the chaos from the night before had happened. No acknowledgement of the things she said, no apology, just a casual, breezy message, like we'd had a normal evening. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I closed the app, put down my phone, and made a silent decision. There wouldn't be a second date. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the message she sent. "Hey, LOL, sorry for the drunk texts. I ended up meeting a friend and got home around 4 a.m. Just like that, as if the chaos from the night before never happened. As if her yelling, her accusations, her name-calling, all of it, had vanished with the sunrise. I put my phone down and leaned back, running my hands through my hair. I felt drained. Not physically, though I hadn't slept much, but emotionally. Something about it all sat heavily on my chest, like a weight I couldn't quite shake off. She was safe. That was the good news. But the way she brushed it all off, the way she acted like it was just another wild night, left me feeling unsettled. And now, even though I hadn't done anything wrong, I found myself questioning everything. Had I abandoned her? Was there something more I could have done? I kept thinking about my sisters. What if they were in that bar? What if someone walked away from them like I did? Would I be furious? Would I say that guy was a coward? But then, another voice inside me spoke up. You didn't walk away without trying. You offered a ride. You offered to call someone. You stayed calm when she lashed out. What more could you have done, really? that inner debate haunted me all morning. Even as I showered, dressed, made coffee, and headed to work, the questions played on a loop in my head. At the office, I barely focused. My emails went unanswered. My meetings blurred together. My thoughts kept drifting back to her, to the bar, to the way she looked at me with those angry, glassy eyes and called me pathetic. What hurt the most wasn't the insult. It was the fact that I had genuinely wanted to connect with her. I'd felt something that night. Not love or anything crazy like that, but a spark, a possibility. That rare feeling you get when you think this might turn into something. And now it had all unraveled so quickly, so loudly. By the afternoon, I decided to talk to someone about it. I called my older sister, Jenna. She answered after the second ring. "Hey, what's up? Got a minute?" I asked. "Of course. Everything okay?" I told her everything, from the Uber ride to the awkward bar scene, the drunken accusations, the blocked number, and even the Facebook messages. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Honestly, sounds like you handled that way better than most people would have." "You think?" I asked. "Absolutely. Look, it's not easy to be the one who walks away, but sometimes that's the most respectful thing you can do. You tried multiple times to help. She refused. You didn't escalate the situation, and you didn't take advantage. That's all anyone can ask." "But what if she hadn't been okay?" I said. "What if something had happened after I left?" "That's not on you," she said gently. "You didn't leave her passed out in a ditch. She was alert, conscious, and making her own choices, even if they were bad ones. At some point, adults have to take responsibility for themselves." Her words gave me some comfort, not because they erased the guilt entirely, but because they reminded me that setting boundaries doesn't make you a bad person. Later that evening, I sat alone on my balcony, with a cup of tea, letting the cool night air settle my nerves. The city lights twinkled in the distance, quiet and steady, so unlike the storm I'd just come through. And as I sat there, I started to reflect not just on the night, but on what it had taught me. First, I realized how important it is to trust your gut. There were moments that night when something felt off. Not dangerous, just off. Her drinking pace, her shifting mood, her refusal to eat. I'd ignored those signs at first, chalked it up to nerves or personality quirks, but in hindsight, my instincts had been right. Second, I learned that kindness has its limits. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be helped. You can offer, you can suggest, you can care. But at the end of the day, they have to make the choice. And lastly, I learned that walking away isn't weakness. It's strength. It's restraint. It's respect, both for the other person and for yourself. Of course, part of me still wished things had gone differently, that maybe, in another version of the night, we laughed over dinner, shared a ride home, and texted each other the next day about how much fun we had. But that wasn't our story, and I was learning to be okay with that. The next day, I unblocked her. Not because I wanted to restart anything, that door was firmly closed, but because I no longer felt anger. I wasn't afraid of what she might say or do. I had peace with how I handled myself. She didn't message me again, not on Facebook, not by text, nothing. And that silence? It felt right. Sometimes the best closure isn't a conversation. It's a quiet understanding that the chapter is over, and that you came out of it knowing more about who you are. So, to the woman from that night, wherever she is now, I genuinely wish her well. I hope she's okay. I hope she finds what she's looking for. And I hope one day she realizes that not every man who walks away is trying to hurt her. Sometimes he's just trying to do the right thing. For both of them. A few days passed. Life went back to its usual rhythm. Work, laundry, errands, scrolling through playlists I'd already heard a dozen times. Yet, in quiet moments, my mind drifted back to that night. Not out of regret, but reflection. Sometimes the most unremarkable moments, like walking out of a bar alone at 11 p.m., leave the most lasting impact. I hadn't heard from her again. After her final message, The one where she brushed it all off like it was just a funny little drunken episode. The silence returned. And oddly, that silence didn't bother me. In fact, it gave me the space I needed to truly think. That night wasn't just about her behavior. It was about boundaries, about learning when to step forward and when to step away, about recognizing that no matter how good your intentions are, you're not responsible for someone else's choices, only your own. I found myself journaling about it, something I hadn't done in years. I wrote about the moment I walked into that restaurant, excited and open to what the night might bring. I wrote about the first glass of wine she had in hand, the smile she gave me, the warmth that initially pulled me in. And then I detailed the slow unraveling, not with bitterness, but with honesty. Writing it down helped me realize how easy it is to confuse connection with chemistry. Just because there's laughter or attraction doesn't mean there's emotional readiness, and just because someone shows up physically doesn't mean they're truly present. One entry I wrote simply said, "Kindness is offering the ride. Strength is walking away when the ride is refused." I shared some of these thoughts with a close friend over coffee one Saturday morning. He'd been married for 20 years, the kind of guy who gives advice with a calm, grounded tone that makes you want to listen. After I told him everything, he sipped his coffee and nodded. Then he said, "You know, it's easy to think we're supposed to fix things, especially as men. We're taught to take care of situations. But sometimes, the best care you can offer someone is respecting their agency. You did that." That conversation stayed with me. It helped quiet that inner critic, the one who kept whispering, "You should have stayed. You should have done more." Instead, I started hearing a different voice, one that said, "You respected her no. You respected her independence, and you respected yourself enough not to stay in a situation that felt wrong." That shift in perspective changed the way I viewed dating. I realized I didn't just want compatibility. I wanted emotional safety. I wanted honesty, even when it was messy. I wanted someone who could have a drink, sure, but also a conversation. Someone who didn't run from discomfort, but leaned into it with maturity. It didn't mean I expected perfection. I certainly wasn't perfect myself. But I began to understand that values, how someone treats others, how they handle conflict, how they speak when frustrated, matter far more than charisma or charm. That's not something I would have fully grasped at 2. But at 25, after that night, I did. Interestingly, that experience also changed how I approached dating apps. I began reading profiles more carefully. I looked for mentions of emotional availability, openness, communication. And if a match sent red flags early on, maybe too much too fast, or a weird comment about alcohol, I didn't ignore it. I paid attention. A few weeks later, I matched with someone new. Her name was Claire. She was 27, a graphic designer, and loved hiking and old jazz records. Our first messages weren't electric or overly flirty, but they were genuine, thoughtful, curious. On our first date, we met for coffee at a small corner cafe, just as the sun was setting. No drinks, no pressure, just two people sharing stories over lattes and biscotti. At one point, I mentioned that is chaotic date I'd had. Not in great detail, but enough for her to know it was intense. She nodded and said, "I've had my fair share of train wreck first dates too, but every one of them taught me something, even the ones that ended with blocked numbers." We laughed. It was a good kind of laughter, not bitter or sarcastic, but light and free. Claire and I didn't fall in love that night, but we did leave the cafe wanting to see each other again. And for the first time in a while, I felt something solid, not the adrenaline rush of a dramatic night, but the quiet comfort of being understood. Looking back now, I'm grateful for the night that shook me. Not because it was fun or easy, it wasn't, but because it made me more intentional. It reminded me that not every date has to lead to something. Sometimes the purpose of a bad experience is simply to wake you up, to show you your own strength, to teach you what you won't tolerate, to prepare you for someone who deserves the best of you. Not just the effort, but the clarity, the calm, and the confidence to walk away when needed. So no, I don't regret that night. Because in leaving the bar, I walked into a better version of myself. And that's the story. A night that didn't go as planned, but taught me more than I expected. Sometimes walking away is the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for someone else. If you've ever had a date that left you questioning everything, or a moment where doing the right thing didn't feel easy, you're not alone. Thanks for spending your time with me today. If this story made you think, feel free to hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life reflections, and maybe share it with someone who might need to hear it. Until next time, take care of yourself and trust your gut.